Hello, and today on the podcast I have Leonie from Birth at Peace, Leonie Birth at Peace, who was a former student. Today we are going to be talking about what is in a name: doula, birthkeeper. What does it mean, and how do we choose that name for ourselves, and also what are the influences that help us to make that decision. I think that's the most important thing. And some of you will have known that I have been a midwife, and then this podcast was Way of the Birthkeeper, and the course that Leonie was part of was called Way of the Birthkeeper, and now it has evolved into being the Holistic Doula School. So why have I just changed the name? I'm just going to ask Leonie, what do you call yourself?
Now I call myself a doula birthkeeper.
And what helped you land on that name?
So I originally rejected the word doula because all I knew of doulas at the very beginning were mainstream people who went to support hospital births, and I thought, and home births, but very much within the system. And I thought, well, that's not very me. I don't want to do that. And also my perception of what a doula was somebody who just supported any and all kind of birth without their own parameters, without their own like discernment or preferences. They were just a completely open book to support any and all type of birth. And maybe I completely got that wrong in the beginning, but that's what my perception was. And I thought that doesn't reflect me. I'd come from a background in free birth. I'd free birthed all of my children at that point when I was considering the names. And I thought, no, that doesn't quite feel right. So I came across the word birthkeeper and radical birthkeeper. And so I was exploring those two terms. And I'm a Libra. I'm not a very radical person, even though I might make some what are considered radical choices, but I do them quite quietly. I'm not a very loud, shouty, about it in your face kind of person. Not that all radical birthkeepers are, but it kind of comes with that connotation for me, that there's a sort of edge to things. And I guess when the mainstream narrative is also quite radical, but in the other direction, sometimes we need something to counteract that. So I didn't reject radical birthkeeper altogether, but I knew that it didn't quite sit right with me. I'm not I'm not a very all or nothing kind of person. I'm not very rejecting of the medical system, as my perception of the radical birthkeeper vibe is that that's what it is. Again, I could be wrong, but that's what my understanding is. And so kind of what felt like in the middle of that was this birthkeeper role of really understanding and protecting the sacred nature of birth, and to take birth back to its roots, and to largely birth out of the system. So I wanted something that would represent my approach to birthing outside of the system, and that's what I thought people would understand if I called myself a birthkeeper. Because that's the thing as well with these titles, isn't it? Some of the courses are accredited and you can go under Doula UK, but also it's not like a midwifery title of midwife. You can't just call yourself a midwife. You have to, well, anyway, maybe that's a whole different conversation. But right now in the UK, you have to go through the training and be registered. So doula, birthkeeper, radical birthkeeper, I could just pick one and call myself that to a degree. And so I landed on birthkeeper because that felt like a middle ground, and then people didn't really know what that was, and I found that it opened up conversations, and that felt like a good thing. But then Birthkeeper started to not feel right again for me. It felt a bit too out there. I think my experience of birthing the twins, I can share about that story if anyone's interested in a minute, but my experience of birthing in the twins was not a free birth. And so now I'm going through a personal experience of going through the medical system and going, well, how does that feel then? And where do I fit now? Am I still working outside of the system, even though I've experienced it? You know, what now? What? It's this big sort of transformational thing. And I landed back on doula actually when I am interested in the origins of the word, you know, around it being a servant, somebody of service, and that's something in particular that I'm very interested in. I want to be of service, and I really want to explore what that means to be in service to somebody, what it is to serve, what it is to not serve. And yeah, but somebody whose birth I'm supporting said, oh, I didn't realise, you know, you're a doula and you support free birth. And so I think the doula birthkeeper combination is good because it represents those two things coming together.
Yeah, I really love it to be able to take these words, because words carry a lot. Yeah, so for me it was, I'm not a midwife now, but am I a doula? I'm not I don't want to say just a doula, but I obviously carry with me something else. So to me, Birthkeeper felt like a good choice, because it was not a doula, but is somebody who supports people having babies and who's not a midwife. But then, like you said, there's this big wave of radical birthkeeper, where this, you know, where birthkeepers are associated with, you know, as I see in a positive way, people who may be free birthing at home. But I don't know, I don't perceive myself as radical either, you know. And actually I too feel like this balance and respect of what we do have, which we have this medical system, which I feel we're very privileged to have, you know, and that I do come from this balance. And actually I was sharing some of what, you know, might be in, like, you know, my birthkeeper contract with a fellow doula, and she said, well, that's just what a doula does. And I thought, and it had taken me a long time to feel like I could own the word doula, having been, as me, having been a midwife, and also that perception of other people, like you say, that people, oh, so you do this, you know. Whereas people have this perception, like you, I felt very much that doula was associated with, I will support all births, regardless of where that you were planning to have your baby or your birth choices, and that is an accepted norm for what doulas stand for, and that it's not about the choices that somebody makes, that you don't make any sort of choice yourself. It's not about you, which is right. If you're if you're working with people, it isn't about you, it is about them. But also there I feel that there is a point where we can say it is about my energy and where I put my time and my expertise almost. And the I feel, you know, as we went through that, the way of the birthkeeper course, and what I was sharing, it was very much about how to support people to have a physiological birth, how to, you know, choosing home birth or free birth, and that this space is there for people who are choosing birth maybe either outside of the system, or really taking that ownership of their birth and don't want to do it solely alone. And I think that I love the doula birthkeeper is a really beautiful way summing that up, actually.
You mentioned it took a while for you to really land on the word doula, like to really let yourself call yourself a doula. What happened to make that shift?
Well, I had to think that what I wanted to do was to, it comes down to looking at this big organisation, the Radical Birthkeeper Society, and absolutely that had an impact on me. And I feel that unfortunately, you've got one organisation that is very rigid in its perception of what is acceptable, what is free birth, what is amazing birth, and that's not where I come from. But what it feels like in social media and generally, that that word birthkeeper has been completely taken by one organisation. I think is associated with that organisation and a perception that a birthkeeper is somebody who only does this. Unfortunately, it's really sad, but the word birthkeeper, which I talk about inside the course, if you Google it and look at that word, was created, a couple of decades ago by it's
Is that her name? That's it.
yes, Janine Pavati Baker. That's it. So it was a beautiful melding of Earthkeeper and birth worker to become Birthkeeper, and they had a Birthkeeper conference, and you can actually Google it and see some of it on YouTube. They're protesting, and it's the Birthkeepers were all about reproductive justice, which is so important. Access to reproductive rights across the world, and it started in the States. And I think we've come so far from what the word birthkeeper originally meant, and to get back to those roots, I think, is a little hard and will be challenging. And so it felt a little bit like, okay, what I'm teaching is something that is it's about being a doula, about being somebody who is knowledgeable and wise and who can sit with women and birthing people as they have their babies in their own power, physiologically, mostly at home, and that you can choose to be that as a doula. Who am I to call myself a doula trainer? So I definitely had some imposter syndrome on that. But actually what I'm teaching is something slightly different, and that's okay. And you can still be a doula, but as you said, you can be discerning about who you work with, and you can actually take care of your own energy and your own expertise. And it doesn't mean that you don't understand the system, because obviously that is a big thing that I understand and want to share with people, is how to navigate the system and how to understand things that have been kept behind, closed doors, white walls, that we take back ownership of that knowledge of how to support pregnancy holistically, how to support birth holistically, undisturbed birth. And that can still be a doula. I don't have to pretend to be something else, But also Birthkeeper brings it together, because actually it is slightly stepping away from the sort of mainstream expectation of what a doula might do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It's almost like we need another word with doula to sort of qualify what kind of doula we are. Because I know that there's a big organisation that I believe doesn't support free birth or doulas at free birth. And so when you advertise yourself as a doula, people don't always know what that means. They might have even heard the word doula or never before, but they go, well, can you support me in this? Can you support me in that? And I think it feels quite refreshing to be able to say, this is what I'm good at as a birth worker, and this is where my strengths are. Because like you say, it's that fine line, isn't it? It's not making somebody else's birth about us, but it's just really recognizing what we bring and what we're carrying as well. Because if we've come from a background, I don't know if this is your experience, but if you're coming from a background in medical midwifery and then you come to more holistic support, you're still carrying that. And so it's not only our strengths, but also, is there anything that we want to let go of? I know that I wasn't ready to go and support in hospitals before I had my own experience of birthing in there. I mean, I still wouldn't feel comfortable supporting somebody who was planning to birth in hospital. I don't think. It's always changing, but you said that supporting women mostly at home, and I think that's the word, isn't it? The key word is mostly, because with the more radical approach, there doesn't seem to be room for those sorts of nuance, as far as I can see anyway. But yeah.
I think that's important. That's what we talk about this a lot, that nuance and balance, that there isn't just only one way. And because everybody has got their own way, and as much as there are people that would choose to have a free birth with no midwifery care, no antenatal, no labour care, no anything, and then and maybe birthing alone. And then there's somebody who would choose a planned cesarean because of, for whatever reason, that feels right for them. And there is this spectrum in the middle, and actually you can be down one end where actually maybe you do want to dip in and have something, and that's not to be frowned upon, which I think has been the case sometimes with some of these organisations, that it's not acceptable, that somehow you're a failure, and that's not the case, because actually pregnancy, as much as it is, we are designed for it, we are biologically made to grow and birth a healthy baby. For some of us, it might be that we need to look at our diet, we need to look at our health, or we do want to dip in and out of what we are very, very lucky to have, actually, this NHS in the UK, those of us that are in the UK, and that we can choose to support people who are maybe further down one end of the spectrum, but that doesn't mean we have any judgment over what they do. There's you can have both, rather than there is only one way. There is, and that's definitely where I come from, that I have learnt that pregnancy and birth generally work really, really well without all of the surveillance that we put on it. But at the same time, for some people, a little bit of surveillance or a little bit of would be wonderful, is good midwifery, may be of real benefit, to them or
Just really, I find it really difficult when free birth is held as the gold standard of birth. And I find it ironic to talk about that, because I've had 3 free births. I support women and families pretty much always through free birth. That is my thing. But I find it really undermines women. It infantilizes them. It's really offensive, actually, to say that you don't know what you're doing by making an alternative choice. I think, again, it's one of those other fine lines by saying these are the optimum conditions, and this is, the optimum way of kind of going with our blueprint of how to have a baby. But if we're only going for that, we're ignoring all of the intricacies of a woman's life and her particular circumstances, and her baby. Her baby is also choosing how they're going to be born to some degree, and her family and her friends and just her whole life comes out through her birth. And to then just to then say that she's failed in her birth plans, even if they don't say it explicitly, I feel like there's this undercurrent of judgment from a lot of people, and I find that really sad. I know that when I had the twins, so I had my second, wild unassisted pregnancy, no antenatal care, nothing mainstream at least. I definitely sought support from other people. Didn't know I was carrying twins, became quite ill with preeclampsia and had an unplanned C-section. That was not my plan. Like, that wasn't what I wanted to do in the first place, but it became very clear it was the right thing. But I do remember afterwards thinking, well, does that mean I'm not part of this club now? This free birth club, this imaginary free birth club, which wasn't even a club, but it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. Like, can I still go to free birth circles even though I didn't achieve my free birth? And it's just so problematic, because as soon as you start going down that line, I think maybe it's to do with birth preparation as well. Like, what kind of birth are you aiming for? Like, that's not my style personally. I don't like to go down that route of a very clear goal, I guess, with birth preparation. I think my personal approach that I support women through is, personal transformation and growth along the way, and then the birth is just kind of the culmination of all of it. But to then, if we put the focus on this goal of free birth, or this goal of, a label of I'm going to be a free birther, or I'm going to be somebody who has you kind of put it into make it your identity. You become a wild pregnancy person. And I just think that's so problematic, because then what happens when life happens, or even if it all works out and you have this incredibly amazing dream birth, it just kind of perpetuates that identity of it. And I just see lots of issues with that. Even if it bolsters that part of your identity, I don't know that it should be part of somebody's identity. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think our names and what we assign ourselves, these identities, it does potentially create problems, and I guess for coming back to the whole, what do you call yourself? If you're putting yourself out there in as a providing a service, the baseline sometimes has to be, how will someone find you and know what you do? And for me, I know that it would be easier for people to find me if I'm the holistic doula school, probably, than the holistic birthkeeper school, although I love that. And I want to be able to make good, change the world, and well, to do some good. And the same as when you're out there meeting clients and being on the internet, how do people find you? What are they going to look for? And sometimes it comes down to as simple as that, what name do I give myself? And then eventually, as you work, people know who you are and what you do. And so, I want to say thank you, Leonie, for mulling this over. I hope it helps anyone who's out there listening, thinking, where do I fit in this? And that balance and being able to be two things at once, and being able to hold both things, the sort of the wild free birth and the sort of the use of the medical system when we need to, is absolutely possible, which is just awesome. And just to end, what do you offer people at the moment, Leonie?
Thanks, Ebony. Thanks for the chat. It's been really great to just tease it apart a little bit. I hope it's been helpful. So I offer doula birthkeeper support in pregnancy, birth and beyond. I'm in Coventry in the West Midlands. I also have written a birth course called Birth at Peace. I'm really, really really proud of it, really love it. It's not your normal birth prep course. It's, women who come to do it usually have a pretty good understanding of sort of basic physiology and normal birth. My course does all the other stuff. It's kind of a personal development, growth. Who am I becoming, this parent to this child through pregnancy and into the birth. And I've also got a new thing on the go called the Peace Project, and it's very, very new. It's this tiny little baby. It's going to be a podcast. I want to talk to all kinds of people in all different fields and disciplines about peace. So in birth, obviously, in parenthood, in death, in health, in global affairs, lots of different things. So yeah, I'm really not to create an identity for myself, but I'm really exploring peace in birth. That's my vibe, and that's what I feel that I can bring families to really sit in peace with their decisions.
That just sounds really lovely. Thank you so much. Everything will be linked beneath here, but you do have a newsletter,
Yes, I do,
mailing list.
Yeah, I got one of them
to get. So
Thanks.
we can. So thank you so much for coming today, Leonie, and I'm sure we will do this again soon.
Ebony. It's my pleasure.
Yeah.